Good evening. We welcome you to tonight's debate sponsored by the Lackawanna County League of Women Voters and the Political Science Department of the University of Scranton. I am Patty Fowler. I am this league's current president. The Lackawanna County League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, which means we do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. Our mission is to promote political responsibility through the informed and active participation by citizens in their government. We encourage you to join the League of Women Voters. Membership information can be found on your program, or you can go to our website, printed in your program, lackawannacounty.org. We are an all-volunteer organization. Please support our work by making a donation on your way out. Donations help us cover costs, including taping, so that the debates can be viewed by a wider audience. ECTV is taping tonight's debate. The taped debate will be available on YouTube and via links from our website tomorrow. This is not a live broadcast. However, ECTV will air this program on Comcast 19 local TV. It will also be shown on YouTube within 24 hours of this debate. Every candidate here tonight signed a debate agreement that included our audio-visual policy. No part of any authorized or unauthorized recording of this debate may be used or distributed by any person, candidate, campaign, or political group for any purpose whatsoever. You may provide a link to the ECTV LWV video on your campaign website. Unauthorized recording is not allowed. To that end, we ask you to please silence and put away any phones or other recording devices. For the first time ever in this debate, we were approached about live streaming. We were never approached about this before. I want you to know that we are not against this. However, this time was not the time to do it. We were approached this week. We had everything set up months in advance. We're not against it in future time, but this time was not going to happen. Upcoming events. The most important event is Election Day, Tuesday, November 7th. Please don't forget to vote. A sample ballot can be found on the Lackawanna County Elections website. Then join us for election returns via a live broadcast from ECTV. An interesting discussion about the elections will start prior to the closing of the polls. The program host will be Andrea Moraine. Tonight's debate is between candidates for Scranton City Mayor. Our moderator is Jean Harris. Jean Harris will serve as the moderator of tonight's debate. She is presently on the faculty of the University of Scranton, Political Science Department, and Women's Studies. In addition, she is a coordinator ready to run for Northeastern Pennsylvania. She is currently on the board of the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County and has been past president. May I introduce Jean Harris?
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. Sorry we don't have chairs for everybody. Larger crowd than we anticipated. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we're proceeding this evening before we get started. So I will introduce the three candidates with a brief bio. Then I'll ask the candidates questions. The candidates have not been provided the questions ahead of time. All candidates will respond to the same questions. You, the audience members, are asked to stay quiet. Don't show reactions throughout the debate so we can get through more questions. We ask that you hold all again, comments, responses, reactions to the very end when the closing statements are completed, and at that point you can show your response to the different candidates. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question. Any time not used cannot be saved for other questions. Denise is in the front row here, or the third row now, and she will be holding up a sign that says 30 seconds when there are 30 seconds left for the candidates to see. You want to hold that up, Denise, so the candidates can see. And then a stop sign. We ask the candidates to finish their sentence at that point. If they go on too long, I will unfortunately have to cut them off. Each candidate has 3 30-second rebuttal opportunities. If after all three candidates have answered the question, a candidate wants to rebut, they can ask for a rebuttal and we will give them 30 seconds. Again, if they don't use those rebuttals, they're gone. We don't save those. At the end, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. And again, we ask that you shut off all your phones and other devices or at least put them on vibrate so it's silent. We drew straws to decide who would go first. Mr. St. Fleur got the X, so he will start with the first question, and then we rotate, so Mr. Courtwright will answer second, then Mr. Mulligan. Second question will start with Mr. Courtwright, and so on. We also drew straws for the closing statements. Mr. Courtwright got that straw, and so he will start with the closing statements, and then we'll go down Mr. Mulligan and Mr. St. Fleur. So with those ground rules, brief introductions. William L. Courtwright, sitting on your far left. His education, he's a graduate of West Scranton High School, trained for 50 years in Tang Soo Do martial arts. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. His civic experience includes a member of the Municipal Police Officers Education and Training Commission for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for approximately 7 years. He served on the City of Scranton Civil Service Commission. Currently, he's serving as a member of the Board of Directors for the Pennsylvania Municipal League. His political experience, he's currently completing a 4-year term as mayor of Scranton. He was elected to the position of tax collector and served from 2010 to 2014. And he served as Scranton City Councilman and chairman of the Council's Public Safety Committee from 2004 to 2010. His professional experience includes founder and owner of Small Business Summit Karate Club. He was employed as the technical services manager for Tran Corporation for 18 years and was an instructor of tactical defense in Lackawanna College's Act 120 police officers training classes. James Mulligan, he has a bachelor's of science from Penn State in criminal justice, a master of public administration from Villanova, a Juris Doctor from Antioch School of Law, which is now the University of the District of Columbia Law School. His civic experience includes community organizing, and he is president of the Green Ridge Neighborhood Association. His professional experience includes being a lecturer at Marywood and the University of Scranton, attorney at the Mulligan Law Firm. He was Deputy District Attorney in Lackawanna County District Attorney Office 2015 to present, General Counsel for the Office of Economic and Community Development for the City of Scranton from 2008 to 2012, General Counsel for the Scranton Sewer Authority 2003 to 2008, City of Scranton Solicitor 1999 to 2002, and Lackawanna County Deputy District Attorney 1989 to 1992. Gary St. Fleur, his education, he's a graduate of Canarsie High School in Brooklyn, New York, and a bachelor's degree in accounting from Brooklyn College. His professional experience includes executive director of the Corline Foundation, financial analyst for Value Walk. He's also the founder of Karma and the founder of Pulsus. So those are the three gentlemen running for the position of mayor of Scranton. So the first question, which will start with Mr. St. Fleur. The gritty reality of being hired by the voters to serve as the mayor of the city of Scranton is that it will be a very difficult job. Why do you want this job?
I first would like to say thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event and to the esteemed guests for attending. Now I'll proceed to answer the question. It must be understood that as a public servant, I don't think that the job should be any more difficult than being a neighbor, being a brother, being a friend. With that in mind, I don't think that it's a gritty reality to be the mayor or a politician or a public servant. I think that it is gritty because of the kind of politics that we observe, because of the kind of people who get into the political arena. They say that politics is a dirty business. And I think that if it is a dirty business, it's because the people who are involved in it are dirty. So from my perspective, there is nothing that has to be gritty about caring for other people, which is what a public servant should do. People vote, and they want their mayor to serve their interests. Therefore, if they vote for me, this is what I will do. I don't see what that has to be difficult. But I do understand that it can be difficult if you have other thoughts in mind, if you're thinking about the interests of other groups or special interests. And this is what politics has become, where individuals claim to serve the people, but they serve the interests of special groups, whether it's lobbyists, whether it's public unions, any concentration of power. The people are put in the back of the bus when they should be in the front and the forefront of the minds of public servants. Because after all, the government's supposed to be by the people and for the people. So as far as I'm concerned, there is nothing gritty if you're doing the right thing.
Thank you. Same question to Mr. Courtwright. The gritty reality of being hired by the voters to serve as the mayor of the city of Scranton is that it will be a very difficult job. Why do you want this job?
Well, that's been asked of me many times. When I first ran for office, I talked it over with my wife, and I saw the situation that the city was in. We were basically on the verge of bankruptcy, and I wanted to see if there was something I could do to bring us back. The city couldn't get a bond rating. There was no name for what we were. It wasn't even junk bond status. We couldn't get loans with tax anticipation note that we were getting, that I inherited from the previous administration, was 9% with interest. This year, the tax anticipation note will be about 2.5%. We had parking garages that were in receivership that the city of Scranton.
Excuse me just for a second, a little away from you.
Okay. The city of Scranton was costing the city of Scranton approximately $3 million a year out of their budget just to keep the garages going. That wasn't to do any repairs or to any upgrades. Matter of fact, you'll see now that we had turned over the garages to a company called NDC, who's a nationally known company, and they brought in one of the top parking firms, ABM. And you're going to take notice they already started on the garage on Linden Street and Washington Avenue. The garages were in such bad shape that they had to tear down the top 2 floors. And that's going to be underway very soon. As a matter of fact, they already started. And as I said, we couldn't get a bond rating. So when you go out to take any kind of a loan or bond, the interest rate was unbelievable. Right now, we're BB plus bond rating, and so to get back to the question, why I wanted to be, I wanted to get the city back on track, and I'm proud to say, after 4 years of the city, be running the city, we're exiting Act 47 distress status. After 25 years of being in distress status, we are finally exiting it. And banks want to do business with us. They are coming to us. The last time we did a bond deal, it was 9 times oversubscribed. That means 9 times more people wanted to do business with us than we had a need for.
Thank you. Mr. Mulligan, the same question to you.
Thank you. I, too, would like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring tonight's debate. With regard to the question, my wife and I are the parents of 9 children, and we both want to give our children an opportunity to stay in the city of Scranton. And over the last probably decade, I've noticed that the city of Scranton is continuing to decline. Our tax base is eroding. There's no economic development in the city. The neighborhoods have all kinds of problems. The infrastructure is a complete mess. The streets, no stormwater. And so I thought long and hard about why I would want to be the mayor. I love the city of Scranton, just like each and every one of you. But we can do better. The sewer authority, a deal that Mr. Courtwright engineered, was a complete debacle. He talks about leaving the Act 47 distress. Not so quickly. Unfortunately for the mayor, he doesn't realize that we have a structural balance in connection with the city budget. What that means is our revenue is not keeping pace with our expenses. So Mr. Courtwright's going to have to do one of 2 things. He's going to have to raise taxes, or he's going to have to sell assets. Unfortunately, no assets still exist. He sold them all, and we all know how that ended up. So it's out of my concern for my families and all the families of Scranton that I want to serve as the next mayor and lead the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. St. Fleur wanted a rebuttal, so 30 seconds, please.
Thank you. I would like to answer or respond to both their comments. The first comment was that the city of Scranton is getting out of financial distress. And anyone with an accounting or financial background would not attest to that situation. For instance, the city of Scranton budget, just if you take the city by itself without any other debts, is upwards of $600 million, $383 million in long-term debts, $195 million in unpaid, unfunded liabilities, and also grievous amounts of borrowing. And as Mulligan eloquently put, yes, the city does have a structural imbalance in its budget, but he is mistaken by saying that the only thing you can do is sell public assets. You can slash spending, which is what needs to happen.
Thank you. Mr. Courtright, did you also want 30 seconds?
Sure. If we talk about economic development, since I've been mayor, 300 new businesses opened up in the city of Scranton, 300. My opponent talks about economic development. How does he plan on bringing economic development to the city of Scranton when he moved his own business out of the city of Scranton to the area where he was born at? So how do you tell somebody, come to the city of Scranton, but I moved my business out of the city of Scranton? As I said, 300 new businesses in the city of Scranton, and they're the bedrock of this town, a small business.
Thank you. Mr. Courtright, if you can leave the microphone a little bit further from you. Thank you. The second question, we'll start with Mr. Courtright. Please tell us what you believe is the most important quality for an effective mayor of the city of Scranton and why that quality is so important.
I think character. I think you have to look at people's character. As I said, I'm born and raised in the city of Scranton. I've lived here my entire life in West Scranton. I've raised my family here. People know me. They know what I'm like. I was fortunate enough for them to vote for me twice to city council because they believed in my character. They voted for me to be the tax collector because of my character, and they voted for me to be mayor because of my character. I think that's what you need to take a look at, the individual's character, how they handle themselves in their personal life as well as their public life. And I think I've done a good job at that. And I believe that right now, more than ever, we don't want to go backwards. We need to go forward. We are finally moving in a forward direction, and we need to continue moving forward, not to go back to the way it was, not to go back to unbelievable debt that the city had. We refinanced all the debt the city had. We had debt at 6, 7, 8, 9% interest, all right? We paid that debt off. Moody's and Standard & Poor's said that the city's deals are credit positive. They are the people that set the credit ratings. They are saying we are doing a good job. Wall Street is saying we are doing a good job.
Thank you. Same question to you, Mr. Mulligan.
Thank you. With regard to the issue of me moving my business out of the city of Scranton, let me just say this, that my partners and I found a great building set up perfectly for law offices, and incidentally, Mr. Courtright, I pay more in city taxes than you do on 2 of your properties. But with regard to what it takes to be a good leader, it's called leadership, and that's been severely lacking for the last 3 years. Mr. Courtright has been missing. He hasn't been out front leading the city of Scranton. I always say, leaders don't stay on the sidelines and shape the future of a city. Leaders step up and shape the future of the city. Mr. Courtright has been relying on consultants, lawyers. Look at the sewer deal. He violated the law. He did not bid out 2 contracts to his largest campaign donor. That's a violation of the administrative code. That's a complete lack of leadership. Leaders do what's expected of them. Mr. Courtright has failed repeatedly. 200,000 no-bid oral agreements with special counsel to the city, his largest campaign donor. That's unacceptable. That's not leadership, and it's leadership that's going to get the city out of the distress that we're currently in. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. St. Fleur?
Yes, I have to agree with both of the points that these gentlemen make, but not necessarily how to elaborate on these points. And let me explain what I mean by that. Yes, it takes character to be a leader, and leadership has been missing within this city. I've come to the city only 2 years ago. And the first thing I heard when I came to the city is that the city is the most corrupt place in America. Now, these are not my words. These are the words of the waiters and the bartenders and the taxi drivers and the real estate agent who told me this. They told me I made a mistake coming here. They said that this place has no jobs, that jobs are only available to those who are born in certain families or have government connections. After extensive research, I find that this to be the case. In fact, a city councilman openly told me that the city is controlled by a political society. So from my perspective, I agree. Character is lacking in the leadership. And I think it's on both of the parts of these candidates that's lacking, because the sewer deal happened in 2015 and was finalized in 2016. And yet, I did not recall, and I might be mistaken, but Mulligan saying anything about it until his political run. I was running my blog, Save Scranton, for the past 2 years and talked about all these issues. I talk about the fact that the mercantile tax has been wreaking havoc on small businesses. I've talked about the fact that there's lack of transparency in the budget, that the city is on its track towards bankruptcy and should file bankruptcy, renegotiate contracts, and lower taxes. I have been adamant about this point since coming here, and I've yet to deviate from my point of view. So yes, leadership is lacking in the city, and I believe it's lacking because both candidates are unwilling to be strong enough to tell the truth. And the truth is, the city is out of time in terms of its financial budget. It needs to file bankruptcy, cut costs, move forward.
Thank you. The next question will start with Mr. Mulligan. Do you support or oppose the call for Lackawanna County to conduct a property reassessment? Please explain your support or opposition.
Thank you. Excuse me, thank you. First of all, I support the reassessment. While the actual reassessment is not within the purview of the mayor's office, it would be my position and to meet with the county commissioners in order to make sure that reassessment is done fairly and equitably between all of the boroughs that make up the county. Now, one of the things that concerns me is that there are a number of elderly people living in the city of Scranton, and they can't afford the staggering taxes. In fact, my opponent raised our taxes 26% in the course of his career. There's people up on West Parker Street making $800 a month in Social Security and have to save $250 to pay their taxes and insurance. They can't do it. The people of Scranton have been taxed right out of the city. That's why people are moving out of the city. That's why people aren't buying properties. We need a fair and equitable way to look at reassessment. And it's unconscionable that for 40 years the reassessment hasn't been done. And Mr. Courtwright's consultant has said right out of the blocks when he did a report, you should write a letter immediately to the county commissioners and ask for a reassessment. To this date, that letter, as far as I know, has never been sent. So, thank you.
Thank you. Same question, excuse me, to Mr. St. Fleur. Do you support, I'll repeat the question, do you support or oppose the call for Lackawanna County to conduct a property reassessment? Please explain your support or opposition.
I'm opposed to a reassessment, and I'll explain why. I don't believe that you put more load on a weak foundation. The city of Scranton is structurally unsound. You have a neighboring city like Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, that has roughly the same population size, 75,000 people, and yet their budget operates at roughly $72 million last year, while Scranton required $160 million. That's nearly 2 times, over 2 times. And my question is, why is it that the city of Scranton requires so much more to manage a city of a population size of 75,000 people? I believe that the city itself has contracts that are not sustainable, whether it's the bonds or whether it's the employee contracts. The police department has 50% of its retirees on disability. The fire department has 58% of its retirees on disability. And it's well known that some of them work in accounting. Why is it that the city is spending its budget on spending workers' comp instead of lowering taxes for the people of Scranton? So any question regarding increasing taxes or getting new revenues is dead on me, because I think the city needs to cut spending. That spending is the city's problem, that they'll do anything else except cut spending. And my lawsuit, which I won last week, regarding the fact that the city has, for the past 10 years, unlawfully taxed the people of Scranton, proves that they have an issue with just maintaining their budget. That's the problem with the city. The budgets do not balance. They need to balance. Cut spending, lower taxes, allow businesses, entrepreneurs, young people to make a living here, and the city will thrive. And this is what will happen under my leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Courtwright, the same question. Do you support or oppose the call for a reassessment by the county government? And please explain your support or opposition.
I support reassessment, but I want to go back to the last question for a minute. Mr. Mulligan loves to talk about the sewer authority, but what he doesn't like to talk about is the fact that he made over $250,000 as their solicitor. He took illegal health care for multiple years to the tune of thousands and thousands of dollars. At the same time that he was getting paid and taking this illegal health care, he didn't pay his sewer bills. So the city had to put a lien on him for these bills. Now, if he wants to talk about, the sewer authority, let's talk about the sewer authority. The other thing I'd ask is when he found out, or because maybe he claims he didn't know, but he's the solicitor. He should have known that he wasn't able to get health care. Why didn't he make an attempt to pay it back? Did he file it with the federal government on his taxes that he got this? So he took illegal health care. So let's, we want to keep talking about the sewer authority, we'll talk about the sewer authority. But let's talk about reassessment. I spoke to at least two of the county commissioners about reassessment and told them I was in favor of it. And I spoke to previous county commissioners, both Corey O'Brien and Jim Wansack, about reassessment. I believe we need reassessment. We need it fair and equitable for everybody, because you see such a large difference in, I know my mom was paying, when she had her house, $700 a year in taxes, and people not maybe 2 miles away were paying $6,000 a year. So I think I think it needs to be, we need reassessment. The thing that I think is a lot of senior citizens don't understand it. I don't know if it was explained well enough. Because some people think that their taxes are going to rise, $3,000, $4,000. I think it needed to be explained a little bit better. Thank you.
Okay, so 30 seconds for Mr. Mulligan on his first rebuttal.
Thank you. Sadly, Mr. Courtwright has resorted to personal attacks. Sadly, Mr. Courtwright has resorted to personal attacks on me with regard to certain issues when I was employed by the Scranton Sewer Authority. Unlike his solicitors, I was appointed by a board. I had written contracts. I had hourly wages. I was provided with a compensation package that was approved by the Sewer Authority Board. And
Thank you, Mr. Mulligan. That's your 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Mr. St. Fleur, your second rebuttal, 30 seconds.
Thank you. What I don't understand from the mayor is why isn't that the city ever discussing cutting spending? Why is that so difficult? Why is it always that you need to find more revenues, some more public assets? When you have older people in the city, 30% of the population lives on fixed income, and they have to make decisions about whether they have to pay their medicine or pay their property taxes. We need to cut spending. We need to lower taxes. If that's not the discussion, I don't think there's any other discussion that should be had. We need to file bankruptcy because our contracts are not sustainable.
Thank you. The next question will start with Mr. St. Fleur. As mayor, what will you do if the state courts determine that the Scranton sewer sale was done illegally, and therefore the sales proceeds disappear from the city's coffers?
This plays right into my position because I don't believe that the city should be selling public assets in order to maintain its budget. That's akin to a pizzeria selling its oven and selling its chairs and then saying, we're not out of business, we're just, making revenues differently. The city is not functioning the way it's supposed to. It's not collecting revenues from the taxpayers and managing its budget because of cost overruns. The budget does not balance. So from my perspective, it's fine if the courts agree to this. It's also fine if the courts agree to my lawsuit against the city regarding the Act 511 cap, that the city has been unlawfully taxing the people of Scranton for the past 10 years. The penalty for this cap is that they can no longer collect taxes in excess of this cap, which affects all local taxes. And in addition to that, anyone who paid in excess of the cap will be entitled to 3 years of reimbursement. That means the city can, in addition to this lawsuit with the sewer authority, face another cost of $50 million. Where are they going to get all this money? They don't have it. And when you're in that kind of situation, Chapter 9 bankruptcy exists for that exact purpose. The city of Scranton needs to face the music. It needs to turn the page on its bad decisions in the past, move forward, innovate itself. There are tons of things that the city could be doing instead of trying to rework bad decisions that were made in the past. And this is what goes on in the city, and it's time to put it to an end. Once I'm in office, I'll make sure that happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Courtwright, as mayor, what will you do if the state courts determine that the Scranton sewer sale was done illegally and therefore the sales proceeds disappear from the city's coffers?
Well, our legal team looked at it long before we did it, and we didn't just turn around and say we were going to do this, and they believe that we're on solid ground and it is perfectly legal. We did talk about, Mr. Flores talking about raising taxes. You know, when I came into office, I couldn't just wave a magic wand and you know, reduce the taxes. But over these last 3 years, you didn't see a tax increase this year. You will not see a tax increase next year. And if the state's not going to just let us go into bankruptcy. They would send us into receivership first. If you go into receivership, do you know what the first thing they're going to do when they come in here is raise your property taxes. I am not going to let this city go into receivership and let the people that have properties, their taxes go up through the roof. I've spoke with the receiver from Harrisburg before I was sworn in. They invited me down to the Westmoreland Club in Wilkes-Barre before I was sworn in, and I spoke to the receiver down there. If you want to go bankrupt, you got to go through receivership first. If you go through receivership, you're going to see our taxes go through the roof. And I'm not going to let that happen to anybody. Again, I repeat myself, there was no tax increase this year, then there won't be a tax increase next year, and we're going to be fiscally responsible so that we could make everything fair for the citizens of the city of Scranton. If you reduce the taxes, you're going to have to cut services. What service would you want me to cut? Do you want me to cut police protection? We have probably the safest city in northeastern Pennsylvania. Do you want me to cut fire protection? We just purchased a fire truck to the tune of $1 million. If we didn't have that truck, we would not be able to fight a fire in this building. Any building that's over 4 stories high needs a fire truck with 80 to 100-foot ladder on it. So if you're going to cut taxes or you're going to go bankrupt, how are you going to provide services to the people?
Thank you. Mr. Mulligan?
Thank you. Well, the first thing I won't do is shrug my shoulders and tell the Times editorial board that, oh, we're going to be fine, that we're going to win the legal cases. Hope's not an option, Mr. Courtwright. The fact is you have to have a plan. And Plan B is this, as follows. I will meet with the governor. I will meet with the state legislators. I will meet with whomever I have to meet with to determine the significance and impact of the loss of those cases. And while Mr. Courtwright's legal team may think that they're on solid ground, I've had the opportunity to review that lawsuit. And it's not only that particular lawsuit, it's the trash lawsuit, the rental registration, the 511 caps lawsuit. The people of Scranton are going to be in a fiscal mess because of lack of leadership. Who was the tax collector collecting the 511 taxes prior to becoming mayor? Mr. Courtwright. These lawsuits are going to cause the disaster of this city because of him, and because they didn't think through the sale of the sewer authority properly. They knew they couldn't expend those monies. So it would be my position to have a Plan B, to meet with the state legislators, to raise revenue without raising taxes. There's a whole host of ways we could do that. That's never even been on the current mayor's radar screen. We need economic development to create jobs, family-sustaining jobs, so people could buy houses, pay taxes, and raise the tax base.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Mr. Courtwright. Given the proportion of city expenditures that cover personnel costs, close to 80% of the budget, are you prepared to ask the unions to open up their current contracts for renegotiation?
Well, we did that. We asked them to open up their contracts. If you're a police officer or a firefighter that gets hired in the city of Scranton right now, you make 50% less than anybody prior to when I became mayor. 50% less. That was enabling us to keep more police officers on the street. We have firehouses open now that were never open before. So we did open up. They were paying approximately 3% into their pensions. They're paying 6% now. So we did open the contracts. We got concessions. We took, for instance, we had 2 police captains in the city of Scranton. We now have 1 police captain. That enabled me to put another police officer on the street. We have a street crimes unit, which is 3 individuals that travel the city constantly looking for people doing illegal acts. A matter of fact, I was privy to hear, I didn't hear it myself, was told that there is a wiretap, all right? And on the wiretap, there are drug dealers coming in from outside the city, and they said, don't go to Scranton, it's too hot. So we did open up the contracts. Again, they were paying 3-point-some%, they were paying 6% to their pensions. Again, police officers and firefighters, starting salary is half of what it was when I took office. So they were willing to open them up also. They opened them up in the middle of a contract, something they didn't have to do. We had a $30 million arbitration award that I inherited, that Mr. Mulligan was part of. He's been a solicitor for the city as long as I can remember. So he was part of the problem that I had to fix, all right? I didn't create this. I wasn't the one that created the $30 million arbitration award, but I was the one that had to pay it, and we did. We paid it, and we moved on. And we've paid off so much debt now that our MMO we're able to pay. We're able to pay it on time, which we weren't able to in the past. The previous administration had the luxury of only having to pay about 75% of it. That went away when I became mayor. I had to find a way to pay 100% of it. So we did open the contracts. We got concessions. We have labor peace. They took 1-point-some% raise when I believe county employees that went to arbitration got 3-point-some% raises.
Thank you. Same question to Mr. Mulligan.
Thank you. Just to clear the record, I was an appointed official with OECD, and I had no, and let me underscore, no involvement with regard to the court award that was issued against the city. Unfortunately, Mr. Courtwright is desperate. He's trying to divert everyone's attention from his failed record as the mayor, the sewer authority included. To answer the question, however, I'll say this. No, I would not open the contracts. What I want to do is grow the economy, grow the tax base, and start to bring business and industry to Scranton. When's the last time any one of us has heard of a company coming to Scranton and creating 300 or 400 family-sustaining jobs? It hasn't happened in decades, and it hasn't happened in decades because of the lack of leadership. Mr. Courtwright has failed repeatedly. The sewer deal, the parking authority deal. The only people that have benefited from the Courtwright administration are his campaign donors. $200,000 no-bid oral contract to his largest campaign donor. Another $200,000 no-bid oral contract to his campaign donors. That's unbelievable. This man has been part of the problem for 14 years. City council, tax collector, now mayor. Do you want us to believe that you're not familiar with the bidding requirements in the city of Scranton, but it just so happened that your largest campaign donor received the 2 no-bid oral arrangements with you on the sewer authority deal and the parking authority deal?
Thank you. Mr. St. Fleur, same question to you. Given the proportion of city expenditures that cover personnel costs, are you prepared to ask the unions to open up their current contracts for renegotiation?
Absolutely. From my perspective, even on behalf of the personnel, it's to their best interest that their pensions are waiting for them when they retire, that they do have a sustainable contract, that they don't have to wake up one day and have their wages reduced to minimum wage. And this happens by having contracts that are sustainable, where the defined benefit plans that are now giving are not in the private sector because it's universally known that they're not sustainable. You have a situation where you have to predict the amount of money you can make in your pension returns. You have to predict how the economy is going to do. You have to predict how long people are going to be alive. And that's very hard to do. So therefore, defined benefit plans are a bad decision. They need to go to defined contribution plans. And if they're willing to do so, that would be great. If they're not, then we need to make other arrangements. And the fact of the matter is that the mayor represents the people. And I understand that the personnel work hard and that they're wonderful people. It's not personal, but they have their union representations. The question is, who represents the people of Scranton? Who represents their interests? They're not doing well. The median income of Scranton is $38,000, and it's $10,000 lower than Lackawanna, the county. There's poor growth prospects here. There's no career track that exists outside of many government or nonprofit industries. So even when Mulligan talks about growing the economy, I'm not sure what role the government would have in growing the economy besides creating conditions for prosperity. And what are those conditions? America was founded on an idea that you are free to make yourself. You are free to take risks and be an entrepreneur. No one's going to be willing to do that if they're slapped with a bill well before they make a revenue. You need to cut spending. That's the way you grow the economy.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Mulligan. What would you do as mayor to increase transparency and public access to the work of your administration?
Thank you. The first thing I would do was insist on following the bidding requirements. As I've said repeatedly, Mr. Courtwright has failed on a number of occasions to follow the administrative code. The administrative code clearly states that anything over $19,400 must be bid out. In connection with the sewer authority deal, Mr. Courtwright provided his largest campaign donor with a $20,000 a month arrangement whereby he made $200,000 and bypassed city council, he bypassed the controller, and essentially the fee would have gone unnoticed except for the persistence of the people of Scranton who repeatedly asked for transparency and accountability. Meanwhile, the mayor stonewalled the people of Scranton, and it took about 9 months for finally the documentation, and it's still not complete, to come out with respect to the fees charged in connection with the sewer authority deal. Now let's look at the parking authority deal. The same arrangement, no bid, oral arrangement for $200,000 in violation of the administrative code. Is that transparent? Is that accountable? That will never happen in a Mulligan administration. Mr. Courtwright violated the law because he wanted to take care of his campaign donors. That's what happened, Mr. Courtwright.
Thank you. Same question to Mr. St. Fleur. What would you do as mayor to increase transparency and public access to the work of your administration?
It's 2017. There's this thing called the internet. You can put everything online with a Web 2.0 website that is easily accessible. There's no reason why this shouldn't be done. There's no reason why everything shouldn't be put up there in real time, where all contracts, all bids, anything the government does should be completely transparent because we have the technology to do so at minimal cost. So therefore, I'm not sure why that's not the case. In fact, when I first came here, the reason why I even talked to the government is to ask them, why isn't there more transparency in the government? Why isn't the website more accessible? Why isn't it more effective or technologically progressive? And it goes to the, I think, the mindset of the leadership of this city. They're talking about, going forward, and I don't think they know how to do that. And pardon me if I sound slightly ageist, but we're talking about a leadership where when they were my age, the internet didn't exist. And to make plans for the next 4 or 5 years or even 8 years when you don't know the current trends of technology, the current trends in the marketplace, when you don't actually know how young people are living their lives, you cannot possibly make decisions about the future. You can't possibly know that in the next 4 years, blockchain and cryptocurrencies become a mainstay, that social media will supplant network television and and streaming devices will supplant television and radio. This is a future that we have, and I think that a leader should know these things and should prepare their people for it. And the only way it's going to happen if you have someone who's currently living this, who currently understands. So the transparency will be there because we have plugins that can be downloaded to do that.
Thank you. Same question to you, Mr. Courtwright. What would you do as mayor to increase transparency and public access to the work of your administration?
Okay, Mr. Mulligan keeps talking about the administrative code. The attorney was hired through the sewer authority as special counsel for the city of Scranton, so the administrative code didn't apply, but he wants to talk about transparency. Let's talk about this. Mr. Mulligan received $3 million grant from DEP. $3 million to do a recycling. He didn't hold up the deal. He didn't hold up to their contract. He's talking about contracts. They revoked the grant. They revoked his bond, all right? He was cited over 11 years multiple times for violations of the DEP. He had 50,000 tires stored on his property illegally. There was a fire there. Again, they cited him. He stored leachate on his property. So if he wants to talk about transparency, why doesn't he tell the people all of those things? He doesn't want to. He just wants to keep on going back and keep on going back to the sewer authority. The bottom line with the sewer authority is if we didn't do the deal with the sewer sewer authority, we would be in receivership right now. I didn't want to sell the sewer authority. Mr. Amoroso, who we brought in from out of town, which Mr. Mulligan seems to be the only one that didn't think he did a good job, several institutions in this city and outside the city paid for Mr. Amoroso. It didn't cost the city a dime because they thought that he was a viable person to have here, and he was an expert in his field. He worked with Cory Booker to save Newark. He works with the Vatican. He does the lands deals between the Vatican and Israel. The man is well qualified. So he doesn't want to talk about those things. He just wants to keep going back to what he wants to go back. He believes if he says it enough, you'll believe it, but I think he needs to go back to that old adage, when you're pointing one finger, the rest of them are pointing back at you.
Thank you. Mr. Mulligan wants a 30-second rebuttal.
Thank you. Number one, fact is that Mr. Courtwright did hire Mr. Abrahamson. He admitted that at the public town hall meeting that you held. You were corrected by Jason Shrive. Secondly, with respect to open government, I will meet with City Council, unlike the current mayor. I will make sure that we have meetings in various neighborhoods, North Scranton, West Scranton. I will.
Thank you. 30 seconds goes quickly. Did you want to rebuttal, Mr. Courtwright?
Yes, I mean, before I became mayor, we all know what city council meetings were like. When I became mayor, Bob McGough, God rest his soul, he passed away, met with me every single Monday after our cabinet meeting, every single Monday, for an hour or however long it took, and we went over everything we were doing. When Bob passed away, Mr. Wexler took over as council president. He, unfortunately, because of his job, he's not able to be there every Monday with me, but he calls me on the phone, and we go over everything. Council meetings, to those two gentlemen's credits, are not a show anymore.
Thank you. The next question will start with Mr. St. Fleur. I think I'm going to have to bump it down to a minute so we can get this question in and still have time for closing. So this will just be a minute, timekeepers. The question is, pick any neighborhood in the city of Scranton. What are the issues you see in the neighborhood, and what actions would you take to address those issues?
I think I would say South Side. And I think South Side is indicative of the lack of leadership in the city, because whether it's Green Ridge or West Side or North Scranton or East Mountain, it's like the city is fractured. It's not inclusive. You know, people are divided in a sense. And I think that goes to the fact that the leadership doesn't include everyone, doesn't let everyone feel that there's a unified vision for the city of Scranton. As mayor, I would create that vision. And I think the vision is that the city can be prosperous. The city will be prosperous. It needs to get out of its own way. It needs to set up the conditions to let the people do what they're already doing and thrive. The city has 5 major highways. Within 2 hours are 90 million Americans. With the right conditions, this city can be the fastest growing city in this country.
Thank you, Mr. St. Fleur. Mr. Courtwright, the same question. Pick any neighborhood in the city. What are the issues you see in the neighborhood, and what actions would you take to address them?
Well, I'll choose the entire city. Blight is a major issue in every part of the city, and we've demolished 125 properties since I've been mayor. And I took the initiative before I was sworn in. I met with Senator Blake, and we discussed a thing called land bank. And so I've worked with the county commissioners. We have a land bank now. It's very difficult for the city to take a property. Many people think once we demolish it, it becomes our property. It doesn't. It's very, very difficult for it to take it over from the individual. But land bank has, land bank is much easier. So we've already seen it happen over in Kaiser Valley. A gentleman there, he was taking care of the property for years. I believe he might have paid $100 for the property, and he'll pay the taxes on it each and every year. So I think blight, and I think we're working towards that goal. Many more that need to be demolished, but you only have so much money.
Thank you. Mr. Mulligan?
Thank you. I've had the great opportunity of walking every inch of this city, and I'm familiar with the issues facing each and every neighborhood. And so I would focus on the entire city. There is blight. There is lack of jobs. There is an infrastructure that is poorly maintained. Just take the stormwater management issue. How do you sell the sewer authority without providing for stormwater management? I raised that issue in April of 2016 in a letter to the editor. Nevertheless, the mayor was determined to sell the sewer authority instead of finding a way to take care of stormwater management and put in place a program. So the issues that are confronting every neighborhood, Green Ridge, West Scranton, North Scranton, Manuka, they're all the same. There's blight, lack of jobs, lack of maintaining the infrastructure, high taxes. It's time for a new leader in this city. Mr. Courtwright has failed the people of the city of Scranton.
Thank you, Mr. Mulligan. At this point, because we're running out of time, I want to first thank everybody for being here. We do have another debate starting at 7:15, so once we're done here, if you're not staying for that debate, I ask you to continue conversations out the doors so we can move on. I have lots of other questions I was not able to get to, but at this time, we'll turn to closing statements. And at the beginning, we drew straws, and Mr. Courtwright will give his closing statement first. And Mr. Courtwright. 2 minutes, sorry, yes, it's a 2-minute closing statement.
Well, let me again thank the League of Women Voters and the University of Scranton for having us here today, and my opponents. The city of Scranton, when I took over as mayor, was on the verge of bankruptcy. I repeat myself, we tax anticipation note 9% interest. Now we're at 2.5. We've taken on the biggest paving program this city has ever seen. Everybody realizes that. Huge, that's infrastructure. That's what we need. We've replaced every single light in the city of Scranton with LED lights. It's saving the city $400,000 a year, and it's making our city safer, brighter. We've paid down debt that the city has been enduring for years and years and years, which enables us to do these things. We bought 2 fire trucks, which we sorely needed, which about $400,000 apiece. We just put into service another fire truck, was $1 million. Our police department now has the best equipment they could possibly have. Our chief, we've got an excellent chief. He's working well with our IT department because policing is becoming more technology than anything anymore. So the city is moving forward. The one thing that sticks in my mind is I went to Wall Street twice. The first time I went there was an individual, didn't speak until the very end, and you could tell that he was in charge. And he said, I like what you're doing with the city, but I want to see that you continue to do that. And the other thing he said is, we're not going to deal with a city that can't deal with themselves. And he was referring to previous council and mayor, because he opened up a folder and he had articles in there. So we're working together, we're moving the city forward, and I want to continue to do that, not just to finish the things that I started, but to keep the momentum. We don't want to go backwards. We don't want to go back to what it was before. So I respectfully and humbly ask for your vote on November 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Courtwright. Next, Mr. Mulligan.
Thank you. I, too, would like to thank the League of Women Voters, the University of Scranton, all of the people who have taken time out of their busy schedules to be here tonight to listen to the candidates, and the viewing audience at home. I've had the great pleasure of walking every inch of this city with my family, and I'd also like to thank them for taking this journey with me. We've walked every inch of the city from Greenbush Street back to Manuka and everywhere in between. And the common denominator is the people of Scranton are resilient. They've had to put up with a lot. And it's my vision to put the people of Scranton to work. We need economic development. We need to start to grow the local economy so that we can grow the tax base to eliminate the structural deficit. That only occurs if you have a leader. We need to bring that Southern California software company to the city of Scranton, because they can't afford Manhattan, but they can afford the city of Scranton. We need to start to create jobs, good paying jobs, to keep our young people here. We need to collaborate with the University of Scranton, with Marywood, with Lackawanna College, with the medical school. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take leadership. It's going to take a leader to get off the sidelines, to step up and shape the future of the city. And I'm asking each and every one of you to join me on that journey to lead the city. And I'm humbly asking for your help and support on November 7th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. St. Fleur?
Yes, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for having this debate. And for all of you coming out tonight, you have probably had other things you could have done, but thank you for joining us. And I want to say that what this debate really demonstrates is that I think both candidates are in many ways sense a race to the bottom. Now, the reason I say this is that personally, I don't know these gentlemen. They might be very good people, but based on what they say about each other and their performance in public life, I think that the city needs a change, that the city needs a new vision, that Mulligan's talking about economic improvement, but never actually talks about the steps as to do it. Bringing governments or bringing businesses to the city is a great idea, but what incentives can you give them when the current city cannot manage its budget by the end of the year? Partnerships with the University of Scranton with other entities are a great idea, I agree. But again, what incentives are we going to do so if you're not privy to the current practices or trades in the marketplace? I think that this place could be a wonderful area for incubators, for venture capitalism, but you have to be along those veins of thinking along those things. And I don't think that happens with these two candidates. I think that they want more of the same. I understand that they speak about moving forward, but the actions and what have transpired in the city, it's not indicative of that. What we see is a city that's very stagnant in many ways, that could just copy what many other cities in this country are doing to thrive and succeed, and would be in much better footing. And that will happen once I'm mayor. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. St. Fleur. Again, I want to thank you all for participating. Hopefully this debate has given you additional information when you go to vote on November 7th. Please don't forget to vote November 7th. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
God, I have so many more questions to ask.